Greetings, fellow Fright Fiends, and thanks for dropping by the Horror Zone. I hope everyone's doing well today. I wanted to do a pretty much an impromptu video. This wasn't something I was planning on doing, but last night I ended up grabbing a handful of Anthony Perkins movies, my favorite actor of all time. I hadn't watched some of these movies in a while, and I decided to just throw them on and watch them on a Friday night. And it was really fun going back and revisiting a few of these that I've seen many times, especially a couple of them. But like I watched Psycho 2 and Psycho 3, two of my favorite films. But I also watched Crimes of Passion, which is a film that I got the Arrow video of this a long time ago. This was a really hard film to find. I tried to find it like years ago. When I worked in San Francisco, I had a friend who had a DVD copy of it. Being such a fan of Perkins, I had never seen it, and he let me borrow it. And then from then on, I tried to find a copy of it, and it was impossible. So when Arrow put out a video release of it, I'm going to say in 2016, I snatched it up as soon as it came out. And it was only the second time I've watched this film. And it's a pretty insane performance by Perkins, as well as Kathleen Turner and Annie Potts is in it. It's a really like psychosexual, over-the-top, zany film that I enjoyed watching and checking out, and very controversial film for its time. But it was really fun watching that, and of course the Psycho films, which, you know, are after Friday the 13th, are my favorite horror film franchise of all time. So today would have been Anthony Perkins' 88th birthday. He passed away on September 10th, 1992. I was 18 years old, and I still remember the day that my mom told me he passed away. I was heartbroken then, and I'm still heartbroken now. I think Anthony Perkins was a misunderstood genius. I always have, and my family, especially my mom, always thought I was weird because I liked him as much as I did, and I don't know what it was. I guess you can say he was my first man crush growing up, but he is, and he still is. I don't know what it is, but I'm just in awe of him and any performance that he did. I've seen as many movies of his that I can find. There's some that are just impossible to find. A good book, though, if you want to know a lot about the movies that he did that were outside of horror, you know, some of his early stuff before he kind of got typecast as an Norman Bates type. More Than a Psycho, The Complete Films of Anthony Perkins, is a great book. And it's written by Don Dable and Jonathan Dable. And I did a review of this book, God, maybe 2 years ago. Amazing book. I read it in I think I read it in like a week, but very detailed. It talks about every one of his films. I've read other books that people have written about Mr. Perkins, especially Charles Weinkauf, who did Split Image. I hated that book with every ounce of my being, because I felt like it was nothing more than gossip and bad mouthing and delving more into the actor's personal life as a closeted gay man. And it really was just a mean-spirited book that didn't have any heart to it and was pretty much just knocking the actor through the entire thing. There was also another one called A Haunted Life. That one was better, but still I just didn't feel like it appreciated the amazing work of this underrated actor. And I feel like these two writers really got it right. They talk about the performances, every one of his. They talk about the ones they loved, the ones they hated, if he didn't fit in a certain role. But really, really well done, and a book that I cannot recommend enough. I'll put a link down below if you guys are interested in this. It is on Amazon. Definitely recommend this during this time where we're kind of being forced to stay in our homes. Something to keep us occupied, you know, movies to watch, television shows to binge, or good books to read if you are a fan of Anthony Perkins like I am. So I cannot recommend this book enough. And I have never done anything on his birthday. I've never done a video. I've done a series of videos over the past 6 years off and on, just talking about different movies of his that I like. And I thought I would just do a top 10 of my favorite Tony Perkins performances and my favorite movies of his. And these might not all be, you know, what other people's favorites are, but they're ones that I watched in heavy rotation growing up or discovered as an adult. And they're ones that I think he absolutely shines in. Some of these movies I do have on DVD, but my room that I have all my movies in, I need to get another shelf because I have so many movies, and some of them are kind of tucked back behind other movies, and I just didn't want to dig them all out. But number 10 for me, and I have to look it up because I don't have the movie in front of me in terms of who directed it, but this was his last movie that he did. And it's a sad movie to watch, but it's one that I've always enjoyed. Here it is. So the last movie he did was called In the Deep Woods. It was a movie he did as a television movie. It actually was released a couple months after he passed away. In this, he plays a private investigator named Paul Miller. You have Rosanna Arquette that's in it as well. Here's a part of it in this book that I was mentioning, In the Deep Woods, right there. And it was directed by Charles Cornell, based on a teleplay. It was based on a novel by Nicholas Conde. Teleplay was done by Robert Nathan and Robert Rosenblum. And pretty much what the story deals with, it follows a successful children's author and illustrator, played by Rosanna Arquette. What happens is she's deeply troubled when a close friend falls prey to a serial killer. The murderer specializes in picking up successful, strong-minded career women, luring them to nearby woodland, then torturing and brutally dispatching them. His vicious spree has earned him the nickname the Deep Woods Killer. And it was a great movie, and it was sad to see Perkins in this film a little bit because you could tell he was in ill health, but he still gave a fantastic performance. And there's a sinister side to him, but he does play a good character in this, a good man that's trying to bring down this killer. And I thought his rapport with Rosanna Arquette was really well. Will Patton, of course, is amazing and everything. But yeah, it was a great film. So number 10 for me will be In the Deep Woods. Number 9 for me is going to be a movie that I don't know if a lot of people talk about, but I think this is one of Perkins' most underrated performances, and that is Pretty Poison. I have this pretty janky copy of it that I found at Rasputin's a number of years ago. This also stars Tuesday Weld, and it's not the standard kind of film that you would think it is. Pretty much Perkins plays like a mentally challenged man who is released after he had started a fire and been committed. It was a fire that killed his aunt, and he pretends to be like the secret agent, and he entices this young girl that's played by Tuesday Weld, and kind of murder and mayhem kind of ensue from that. And it's a really, really different film, that kind of you think is going to go one way just because at this point Perkins had been known to have played Norman Bates. But it goes a very different way, and it's very unexpected, and I really liked it. And I think this is an excellent recommend for people that are fans of the actor like I am and are looking for some of his lesser-known roles or lesser-known films. It's one that definitely needs to have a special edition or any type of better release. I'm sure there is one out there, and this one just happens to be what I have. But it's a great film, and I definitely recommend it. So number 9 will be Pretty Poison. Number 8 for me is going to be the one I just watched last night, which is Crimes of Passion. This is a very insane performance by Perkins, and I believe he was dabbling in substances when he did this. There is a little bit of trivia in this film that he and Kathleen Turner were both doing hits of something before each scene, and you can totally tell Perkins is off his rocker in this film. He is just absolutely stone cold fuck nuts in this movie, but I love him for it, and I love how far he would push the boundaries. Just shows what a versatile and committed actor he was. I also thought Kathleen Turner was great in it, and yes, this is risque, and it does have some pretty frank dialogue, and it's shocking that this film came out when it did during the Reagan era, when everything was about repression and things like that. So it was really a big spit in the face to those type of ideals. And the unrated cut is the one that I watched that's on this. There's a director's cut and an unrated cut. Unrated is it's pretty raw. I'm surprised they got away with what they got away with, and the fact that Kathleen Turner did Romancing the Stone the same year that this came out just absolutely shocks me. And that this also was the year Ghostbusters came out, and Annie Potts, who played Janine, and that is in this. But yeah, it deals with relationships. It deals with wanting to be somebody else, hiding behind a persona when you're not happy with who you are. But it also speaks again heavily about repressing sexual repression and things like that. And I think it's insane, but it was very entertaining to watch, and one I'd like to revisit again, because again, this was only the second time I've watched it in full. I've seen clips of it throughout the years, but bought this like 4 years ago, and this was just the first time I actually watched some more than just the special features that were on this. So yeah, Crimes of Passion, if you can find it, definitely recommend checking it out if you want to see a really off-the-wall performance by Mr. Perkins. Number 7 for me is going to be in this double feature put out by Scream Factory, and although I do like The Destroyer, Edge of Sanity is going to be number 7 for me, and this is the very different take on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde that Perkins did in 1989. Instead of you know, Dr. Jekyll forming some type of formula that he drinks and turns into Mr. Hyde, this one he's experimenting with cocaine. So when he becomes Jack Hyde in this, he's got like this really white makeup kind of face. His hair is all black and kind of combed down, and very insane performance by Perkins. But I think between the dualities that he has in the film, being Jekyll and Hyde, I think he does a good job of balancing them. And it's one I really recommend. I just have always enjoyed watching it. Number 6 for me is going to be Fear Strikes Out, the Jimmy Parasol story, which is a film that Perkins did before Psycho. He plays this guy that just is completely trying to make his father proud. His father is played by Carl Malden, and he just pushes him to the breaking point. So it deals with mental breakdown, mental collapse, you know, nervous breakdown, and you just see what all of this pressure of trying to become being recruited by the Boston Red Sox does to this man. I think this is a very excellently made film. The relationship between Carl Malden and Perkins in this is really well done. And I just think the breakdown scenes that he has in this, you just completely feel for him. He's so good in the film. And you just see like how he just doesn't want to disappoint his father, and how that just pushes him to the breaking point. And the scene where he has the breakdown on the baseball field and then tells his father in the hospital why he is the way he is, and that all that mattered to him is that he win. It didn't matter about, you know, anything else. And I don't know how Perkins didn't get nominated for this. It's a fantastic film, and one of the best he ever did in his career. I absolutely enjoy this film, and it's heartbreaking to watch. Number 5 for me is going to be The Black Hole. I love this film. This was the first thing I ever saw Perkins in. This movie came out in 1979, and I was about 5 years old when I saw it, so I remember it was a double feature. My mom took me to see this. This is a Disney movie. She took me to see this and Sleeping Beauty. I remember it was a double feature of both of those films. And this movie scared the shit out of me as a kid, especially the Maximilian robot. There's a big red robot that's in it, and I remember, even this is before I would have ever seen any, you know, Psycho. This was 4 years before Psycho 2 would have even come out. But I just remember there was something about Anthony Perkins in this film that I was already drawn to. Something very familiar about him. I always thought he looked a little like my Uncle Jack. But there was something about him that I just thought was cool in this film. And he's great in it, as is the late Robert Forster, who I was very sad to have passed last year. And then you also have Ernest Borgnine, the late Ernest Borgnine, and Maximilian Schell, who's also really creepy in this film. I've always enjoyed it. I have the record with the storybook and everything. When I was a kid, I loved Vincent and Old Bob, who did the voices were done by Roddy McDowall and Slim Pickens. But yeah, The Black Hole has always been one of my favorites, and I still enjoy watching this film. Okay, for my top 4 films, these are going to be the Psycho films, because again, these were the films that made me a fan of Anthony Perkins. Number 4 for me, even though I've grown to appreciate it more over the years, my least favorite Psycho film, but still a masterpiece from the ones that Tony Perkins did, is Psycho 3. I love this film. Of course, he directed this film. It was his directorial debut. Psycho 3, revisiting it last night, it was like, you know, catching up with an old friend, and during this time where we're kind of quarantined, it was really nice watching something that I grew up with. The first time I saw this film, I was 12. It came out in the summer of '86. It was the only film in the Psycho franchise that I saw in the theaters, if you don't count when they re-released the original Psycho several years ago. I got to see that in the theaters, which was amazing. But this was the only one I got to see, and I still love this film 100%. The summer that this came out, we were actually in LA for my cousin's wedding, and my mom promised she would take me to Universal Studios, but she got so stressed out by the Los Angeles traffic that she didn't take me. She said she couldn't drive to Hollywood, and because of that, and I was heartbroken, because all I wanted to do was go to the Psycho house and see it. And this film has this very special place. I love everybody in it. I love Tony Perkins. He does a great job of balancing directorial duties and acting. Fantastic as Norman Bates, a very twisted, different version. I almost see this version of Norman Bates now more like his character in Crimes of Passion, more so than in Psycho 2. I felt Psycho 2 was almost an older representation of what he was in the original Psycho, where this one seems a little bit more psychosexualized, very similar to what he had done in Crimes of Passion. Not to that degree, but there's just something different about the way that it's performed in this. And again, this film was his follow-up to Crimes of Passion, or one of his films that he did after. But also love Diana Scarwood as Maureen Coyle. She's fantastic. Roberta Maxwell, I can't stand the character, even though she's the good person in it who's trying to prove that Norman Bates killed Mrs. Spool. But you still just can't stand her. But she does good with what she's given, and she's great in the role. Jeff Fahey, absolutely he's amazing. I love that guy so much, and he's so great as the slimy Dwayne Duke. And I just love the use of colors that Perkins has in this. Some of the shots of the house were done from different angles than before. I love the homages to some of the deaths in Psycho that are done in this. And the ending is heartbreaking for me, and still is. What a fantastic film, and Perkins deserves so much more credit for the work he did on this than he got. So number 4 for me will always be Psycho 3, one of the best films, one of my favorite horror films of all time, and my 4th favorite in the Psycho franchise that Tony Perkins was in. Number 3 for me in the Psycho franchise will be Psycho 4: The Beginning, and I know this is a controversial choice, but we're coming up on the 30th anniversary of this film. This film came out in November of 1990, and I still remember it very well. It premiered on the Showtime network. It was hosted by Janet Leigh. She actually showed this, and Psycho, the original Psycho, aired immediately after, and it was uncut. And I remember there was a contest you could have entered, because this is when they rebuilt the Psycho house and the motel in Universal Studios, Florida. And there was a chance you could win a trip to go there, and I entered the contest. I don't remember how many times I entered it, but I didn't win. Of course I didn't win. But I did have a Psycho 4 poster, and I don't know what's happened to it. I had it. It was sent to me. I used to have it in my room, and it was a really cool poster. But it got lost when we moved into this house, and I've never been able to find it. So I might actually try to seek it out, but it really pisses me off I don't have it. Psycho 4 was great for me because I wanted to see how Norman Bates went nuts. And there are some things in this film that stick out to me a little bit, because this was meant to just be a sequel to Psycho, or a prequel to Psycho, because it does show what happened before that, as well as, you know, Tony Perkins calling into the radio station, talking to Fran Ambrose, that, you know, of course taking place after the events of Psycho 3. But Joe Stefano didn't want to tackle anything that was talked about in Psycho 2 and 3. He wanted this to be a sequel or a prequel just to the original Psycho. So there's some things that are changed. Some of the things that we found out in Psycho 3 regarding Norman's father are completely erased, and those are little things that irritate me. But at the end of the day, I think Perkins does a terrific job. Again, this is his swan song as the character. I think that Mick Garris did a fantastic job directing this. I love the way the motel and the house look during the earlier childhood memories of Norman Bates. And I think Henry Thomas and Olivia Hussey were terrific as Norman and Norma. I think they both did a great job. Norma, for me, was always an older woman, just based on the way that the voice was done in the first 3 films. So it was interesting to see her as this younger, beautiful, sexual woman, and just how she tormented Norman and made him snap. And I still think the scene where he poisons her and her boyfriend is one of the most disturbing scenes in the entire franchise. Definitely check it out. It's not perfect, but for me it is. I still remember watching this, and I actually skipped a family reunion because they were having a family reunion the night that this premiered, and probably a bad choice. I don't think I'd do that now, but I still remember I wanted to stay home and watch this. It was the only thing that meant anything to me at the time. But this film is very special to me, and I'm saddened that it was the last performance as the character that Perkins gave. But I think it went out on a good note, and I love the ending of this film. I think it caps off the series brilliantly. Here comes some more controversy. So number 2 for me is going to be Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. I know for a lot of people this is the best, and it is the best. It's one of my favorite films of all time. I saw this one second in the franchise. I believe I had seen maybe a couple of images from this film, or maybe the shower scene or the ending when I was young and had been on television, but I didn't see this one until after the film that is my number 1. And but I mean, this film is absolutely brilliant. It's my favorite Hitchcock film. It always will be. This is probably my 5th or 6th copy of it. Every time they re-release it, this is the Steelbook, which I always loved, and that's my favorite quote on the back. We all go a little mad sometimes. yeah, Psycho's amazing. I had the honor of meeting Janet Leigh back in 1995 when she was promoting her book on the making of it, and I did talk about Anthony Perkins with her, if I remember correctly. Again, I was kind of in awe seeing her, but I did talk to her about him and just said thank you for writing the book, and really great book that goes into detail about everything that went into making this film, and she was amazing, and this film is amazing. Everybody in it. Tony Perkins is amazing as Norman Bates. I absolutely love him in this. I could watch this film over and over again. But not only him, but Janet Leigh, Vera Miles, Martin Balsam, John Gavin. Everybody in this film does a fantastic job, and the location, the motel, the house, everything's a character. Everything works so well. Hitchcock, masterful director. And I'm not telling anybody anything that anybody doesn't already know. Psycho is one of the best films ever made. It's one of my favorite films ever made. Number 2 on my top 10 of Tony Perkins films. So that leaves number 1, which shouldn't be any surprise. It is Psycho 2. Psycho 2 is not only my favorite Anthony Perkins film, it's my favorite, one of my favorite sequels of all time. It's a fantastic sequel that has no right to be as good as it is. It's 22 years after the original Psycho that this came out. Originally, this was going to be a made-for-TV movie. When the studio didn't think they were going to be able to get Anthony Perkins to play the part, they actually were going to have Christopher Walken play Norman Bates. But once Perkins signed on, they decided to do this as a theatrical release, and they shot the entire thing on the back lot at Universal. They rebuilt the house. The motel in it is so cool to watch it now, because if you watch the one long shot of the motel that you see as Dr. Raymond and Norman Bates pull up to the motel after he's released from the asylum, it's half of that is a matte painting. They didn't have the entire motel finished, so only, I believe, the office through cabin 1 or 2 is where the motel ends and the matte painting begins. And you never see the full motel in any shot in the film after that. So yeah, I mean, this, of course, this film is set 22 years after the original Psycho, and it's when Norman Bates is released. He's been declared sane. He's sent back to his motel and house from the original film. And my wife was watching it with me yesterday. She said, who was the genius that said it was okay for him to go back to where he committed all these murders? And it's funny if you think about it that way, but for me, this was my introduction to Tony Perkins and the character and the legacy of Psycho at this point. Nobody thought this film was going to make it, and it's crazy. Next to Return of the Jedi, this film was the top film of that year when it came out, so that's insane. This film was a huge hit for Universal and a big comeback for Tony Perkins, who had pretty much gone into made-for-TV movie obscurity. He just wasn't doing a lot at the time, and but his performance in this, I'm shocked that he never got nominated for it, especially the scene where he breaks down in Meg Tilly's arms, talking about that all of his memories of his mother are gone except for the sandwiches that she used to make him when he was sick. It's one of the most heartbreaking scenes, and him and Meg Tilly play it so well, despite the fact that they had friction on set together. But everybody in this film is amazing. Robert Loggia, the amazing Vera Miles, Meg Tilly, who I still think is such a gorgeous, beautiful woman, and she's always been one of my longest crushes growing up. I still, next to Janet Leigh, she's my favorite from the Psycho franchise. Fantastic cast, amazing direction by Richard Franklin, and fantastically written by Tom Holland, who did go on to do Fright Night, Child's Play. Just a fantastic, well-written, amazing continuation of the Psycho story. And I think for the longest time why I always was so drawn to the Norman Bates characters, because this is my introduction to him. I felt so sorry for him. And yeah, in this, if you're thinking about what Norman Bates had done, the crimes he had committed, you should be on the side of what Lila Loomis is doing, the Vera Miles character. But because Perkins was so good in the role, you're citing, again, why so many people were upset about Psycho is because through that whole movie, you're actually empathetic towards a murderer. And in this one, you're doing the same thing. And again, it's just hands down shows what an amazing, amazing actor Perkins was, because you feel so much empathy for him. And you see he's just trying to be a good man. He's just trying to get his life back, and people just won't let him be. And they're trying to make him go nuts again. And it's a heartbreaking film. The score in this is, next to Salem's Lot, the Harry Suckman score, this score by Jerry Goldsmith, the late great Jerry Goldsmith, is my favorite score of all time. And it's just so haunting and beautiful. everything about this film is just amazing, and I never get tired of watching it. And 10 years old, watching this for the first time on cable, I was hooked. I've been hooked ever since, you know, going on 36 years of loving this film, and I will always say it's one of the greatest horror films ever made, and the greatest performance by the late great Tony Perkins. So that is going to be it, fellow fiends. Just sharing my love of Tony Perkins and the work that he left behind, the legacy of Tony Perkins. I wish that he could have lived longer. I wish I could have met the man. He will always be my favorite actor of all time, and I just wanted to do something special to celebrate what would have been the man's 88th birthday. So thanks so much again for watching. Let me know if you guys are fans of Tony Perkins. Let me know down below in the comments section what your favorite film of his is, and I really appreciate it, and I hope everyone's doing well. Stay scared, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later. Peace. I want to thank everyone for taking this time to drop by the Horror Zone. It really means a lot to me that people are supporting what I do here. If you like this video, please hit the subscribe button down below. I upload videos at least once or twice a week. It would really mean a lot if people would spread the word about this channel. This is a passion of mine. I love the horror genre, and I'm really happy to share my love of it with all of you. So thanks so much again for checking it out, and I'll talk to you guys later. Take it easy. Peace.